Alright, thanks everyone. This is amazing, the vibe and the revision. I really dig it so far. And I'm really glad that so many people showed up. Who of you is already familiar with the concept of curation markets? Very few, I guess. Okay, so it is a very fresh topic. It just got pioneered about 7 months ago, and people came up with ways of tokenizing things.
Is this better?
Yeah. Oh, very different.
They came up with things to token. They came up with ways to tokenize things that we could not represent in formal assets before. So basically, it started with a token that gives you the right to vote on things. So one of the main applications of curation markets, for example, is a token that you can use to then vote on what should be on a list. So this is a kind of weird thing to buy the power to vote. But there are many other things that you can now buy because you can easily create an asset and say this asset represents that thing. And if everyone agrees that a certain asset represents a certain thing, then that becomes a way to buy it. So the core problem that here at Convergent we are trying to solve is actually that for a lot of interactions, a lot of exchanges that we engage in our lives, there is no way to formally capture that on a market. Can I have the clicker, please? We are constantly creating value, we're constantly interacting with people, but we only really capture a tiny fraction of that value we create. If we are now standing here, I mean, I'm presenting something to you, I probably create some value for you, but you're also creating value for me. Now, this is a funny case where there's actually a double coincidence of wants. You want information and knowledge that I have to provide, and I want your attention. I want to get an idea out into the world. So we basically make a trade here, but it's a coincidence of want that doesn't often occur. Usually you don't have exactly what the other person needs, and the other person doesn't have what you need. So that's why we usually use money to make exchanges. But for a lot of exchanges, there's a too high transaction cost of capturing that in money value. So if you're having lunch with someone because you want to help them develop their career, and let's say this is a person that you will never meet again, you might still do it because you want to help that person, but you would not say, okay, I need like €5 from you. Actually, we start doing that. We say, hey, you pay my lunch and I'll be happy to talk to you. There is an exchange happening there, even in formal monetary values. But in a lot of more exchanges that could occur, the transaction cost of making that trade is too high. Already with this lunch thing, it's kind of costly to tell someone, can you pay my lunch? I mean, I don't do that because it's a little bit painful. So the transaction costs are too high for this trade. So I end up actually not having lunches with people that I won't meet again. So in this way, you have to imagine the number of exchanges that never occur because there's no way for us to capture the value of it. Maybe we would post much more content if we could get paid for it on Facebook. Maybe we would have more lunches. Maybe we would just speak more to other people because we have a feeling that we can get something in exchange, that can be trade, even when the other person doesn't have exactly the good that we need, so that we don't have to do barter. So for firms, these transaction costs are also high, but the values that are exchanged are so big that it still makes sense. The firm does engage in exchange with you. It gives you, for example, stock. And then this stock represents the value that the firm will give you over time. So this goes into the future. This goes not just into the exchanges that are happening now, the firm might not give you anything right now, but you're buying the future profits of a firm when you buy their stocks. Now this is something that would probably not be possible right now with humans, with individuals. Like maybe there's a few ways for me to monetize an exchange right now. I have this idea of you paying my lunch when I talk to you. Or on earn.com, this new website, you can get paid in order to answer an email. So this concept is starting to evolve, but still there's no way for anyone to invest in my future profits, my future values. If I tell you, I will give you an hour in 1 year, can you please pay me for that? You probably say, this is not a deal that I would do right now. There's no way to trust that I will actually give you an hour of my time in the future. And there's no market to assess the value of this promise of me saying, I will give you an hour of my time in 1 year. That's exactly what we're creating at Convergent. This is what curation markets is basically about. It's leveraging blockchain technology to create tokens, to create tradable assets that represent something in the real world. And in our case, what you can actually represent with a blockchain token is an individual action, a super granular unit. Let's say 1 lunch with me, or 1 hour of my time in 1 year, or 1 advertisement in a video that I will produce in the future. These things are now possible to capture in a formal asset and tradable because the cost of creating formal assets has become so small. You can now launch your own rare digital asset with a click and €3 transaction fees. And now curation markets is a concept which makes this launching of your own token, your own currency, a lot more transparent than it was before. Curation markets and the general blockchain cryptocurrency scene have one big difference. In the general blockchain scene of 2017, you launch a token by just saying, right now, 2 million tokens exist, and I will sell them to everyone who wants to have them, and I get the money for them. In the curation markets concept, there is actually a smart contract, a piece of software that creates the token and that sells the token and also buys it back. So it doesn't depend on you as an individual taking all the money that you get from your ICO. Rather, the token, the contract itself, the software does an ICO. This is a concept that I want to illustrate here. Using the example of Convergent, this is a new project that just started about 2 months ago and only formally incorporated in some way on Twitter, let's say, yesterday. And so this is the first time I'm really presenting this publicly, and I'm really curious to get people's feedback. So the way we structure it, also everyone will have their presentation, and in the end we'll collect feedback from groups that are interested in the project. So let's show you what we would like to build. And just a little preparation, there is actually an inspiration that comes from existing personal tokens, where people already have launched their own token and have said, this token now represents a value that I can provide in the future. One example is Bitcoin. It was launched by an artist in New York, and she said she's still struggling, she doesn't really sell her art yet, but she launched a token and said, whoever gives me this token gets 25 square centimeter of an art piece that I'm going to create. And so she did her own ICO. A lot of people bought it because they believed that her art is still crap, but she will become famous and she will produce valuable art. Jonas Lund is another artist who said, if you want to have me as a speaker at your conference, you need to pay me in my own cryptocurrency. And then, of course, we might know K. Mikey M, who said, I'm gonna put my entire life on the stock market, and all my investors decide what major life decisions I take. So people had him break up with his girlfriend because they believed that his value will increase if he's alone. We're not going that far, but rather we give you, the user, the option to tokenize parts of your life and basically build your personal economy with whatever services, whatever values that you want to provide. So what happens when you go to Convergent's Arena platform, you basically have the option of launching your own token, and you can then decide what services you want to sell. Let's say Olivier goes here and he says he's launching his OLS token, and he has a few services that he can provide. He's a prolific coder, so he might want to provide a code review. And he says, code review should cost people, let's say 10 of my OLS coins. And then I'm also an expert in crypto economics, and this is even more valuable, this is even more rare. So I'll give you like crypto consultation for 100, because that requires a bit more research. But anyone can offer any kind of services, and even if you're not an expert yet, you could say, I'm becoming an expert in a certain field, and I will now launch my token, which will give people the right to buy that service. So now let's deploy this token. And now it exists here. And the interesting thing about the way curation markets work is that this token is now already purchasable and also tradable, even though no one has bought it yet, and even though probably very few people care about it right now. Like Olivier has a few thousand people that know him and that know that he's valuable, but that's not enough to create a real market. If you have a token for one person, it's not going to be listed on an exchange. The cost of putting that token on an exchange is way too high for an individual to afford it. And also, it's very unlikely that two people will come along who have Olivier's token. The one person wants to buy and the other one wants to sell, so that they meet at the exchange at the right time. It's very unlikely to happen with these small token economies. But this is exactly where curation markets reduces the transaction costs even more, because here it's a smart contract that sells the OLS coin. I can buy OLS coin now because it's very cheap. The price right now is 0. When I want to buy one, I just have to pay 0.001 Ether. So I'm buying an OLS coin right now, and what happens is that this money that I put into the smart contract, it gets saved in the contract. It gets deposited. It stays there. It's a reserve. So now, let's say someone else comes in and sees this. He sees that the price is a bit higher. The price now is 0.001. And in this way, the price increases further and further, depending on how many people have bought. So someone else comes in and he buys 20. He already has to spend more money. And now there's a reserve of 0.4 Ether in this contract. And whenever someone wants to sell the token back, they have to send the token to that contract, and then they get some of this money back out. So now the person who was there in the beginning, who bought only one, he bought it for 0.001. Now if he sells this one token back, he actually gets 0.021 Ether. So he can make a profit just because one other person has invested in this asset that he has discovered earlier. So I realized that this is a bit heavy for the beginner, but this is the best way I can illustrate the concept of bonding curves, which we're going to encounter again and again. Just a little recap. The idea is there's a smart contract that buys and sells the token at any point in time. and it adjusts the price of one token depending on how many people have already bought into the asset. And this way, if you discover Olivier's token early, and you say, man, Olivier is selling his time, and it's really cheap right now, and you invest into it, and then later on, Olivier becomes super famous, and a lot of people want to get his coin, you can benefit from that. So you, as an investor, benefit from discovering people who are still undervalued. So if I had this running, I would ask you all to launch a token, and then I would talk to you, and after that, I will go home and invest in the people that I believe will become more valuable to the market. So this is a pretty edgy idea, I realize. I hope I could get the message across that this is still experimental, and we are, of course, seeing a lot of problems still. So one is, what individual services really have enough value? Because still there is some transaction cost. To launch a token still costs you €5. And to make a transaction still costs you €2 every time, because there are these transaction fees on the blockchain. So few services will actually have enough value that only you can provide to justify going through this complex system. That's an open question. Also, how can we ensure that Olivier actually commits to provide this coding review whenever someone pays him in his token? Like, he might say, okay, someone paid me my token, but no one can force me to actually spend an hour with that person, right? That will be priced into the token. If people don't believe that Olivier will actually honor his commitment, then this token won't be worth much. And then, how can Olivier actually earn from the system? Because what could happen, of course, is that a lot of people buy into Olivier's coin, and they keep buying. So someone buys 100 of those, but all that money goes into the contract. It doesn't go into Olivier's pocket. It stays in the contract. And only when someone actually requests the service, someone wants to do this crypto consulting, he pays Olivier the 100 token. But if no one pays him, but everyone just invests, he doesn't get any money out. So there should be some ways for him to already extract some of this money from this contract. And this is something we have to figure out. And the last problem that we're still considering is, oh, that was actually the last one. So use cases, not just experts like Olivier, but I guess mainly people who aspire to become popular, who will be in high demand in their hopes and aspirations. Influencers, bloggers, people in the attention economy in general, because there the value of your attention can change drastically. A pizza always has almost the same value. So it doesn't make sense to tokenize that and let investors, let the market figure out the future value of a pizza. It's going to be pretty simple to figure that out. But my 1 hour of time and your 1 hour of time is worth something very different today from in a few years, especially in your aspirations. So this is an open source project, and we're still very fresh. We're open to all kinds of suggestions. Find us on convergent.cx and unlock your personal economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. So I would like to open questions, 5 minutes questions from the audience.
That's really very impressive, to be honest, and it's into the microeconomy as well, which is really bravo. The only thing is about governance. In terms of any dispute or anything happens, so for example, I paid this Oliver review and then suddenly he was sick, or say let's do that next week and never appears. Can I go to the smart contract, or what's happening?
So that is something that will be left to the participants to decide. And Olivier could say, you know, I want to increase the trust in my services, so I will automate this. I will say, you get my time automatically because when you pay me, my calendar or my personal robot, let's say we're in that age, kind of blocks this time and puts me in touch with you. And if you can automate that, this could actually increase the value a lot, because then you know that he's not going to be able to default. Of course, there will always be cases where he has to default. And if he does that in a way that the market thinks this is not honoring his token, he will be punished because his token won't be valuable. So in a way, this reinforcement is kind of built in, because you have an incentive to make sure that your people, your investors, trust your token. Otherwise, your token will not be valued. So basically, you will always try to make it really public and really clear that someone paid me and I gave them the service. So this works really well with influencers. Let's say I'm paying an influencer to say I want to have your token because I want to have this power to place a product in your Instagram. And then I pay him, and then he either places it in Instagram or not. If he doesn't, I will open up his Reddit and say, hey, this guy is not, delivering. If he does late or something like with some hesitations, I will still make a fuss about it. If I give him an ad for his Instagram and he looks at it and he says, I cannot put this in my Instagram, man. This is offensive. This is a Nazi symbol. I cannot put this. Then I guess the market would say, well, that guy placed an ad that was not acceptable, so it's okay for the creator not to accept this. This is something I think will be kind of equilibrated.
That's your last question.
Yeah, one suggestion for this problem might be Claros. It's another service that you could basically just plug in to a service like this. My question was, if you have a bonding curve, basically trading the token, what happens if there is a secondary market for the token happening on an open exchange, and that would probably run on a different price? Then there would be a lot of chances for arbitrary trading, right? How do you control them?
So this token, for example, it always buys and sells at 0.12 ETH per token. Now, if the exchange has a price that is higher than that, everyone would just buy from this token and then sell it on the exchange for more, right? But that would push the price of this token up. So then they would equilibrate, and then they would be equal. So it's true. Whenever there's an arbitrage opportunity, there will be arbitrage, and then the price will be equal again because there can't be arbitrage for long.
What's going to happen if 2 million people buy 1 hour of code review? Does the price adjust, or is there a limit to the amount of tokens you can have, or?
I think this is one of the central challenges that we are trying to tackle with this technology. What happens now is that if 10 people buy 1 hour, the price pushes up. Right now the price is already at 1.12. If now 200 people more buy it, the price would be so high that for the next person to buy it, he would have to be really crazy actually. So we have to make sure that these curves adjust the price in the correct way. And if this guy is already swamped with requests, the price would have to go up very steep and very, almost vertically, so that no one can buy more of his time. But this is something that will be individually adjusted to every use case. For time, it's clear that you cannot spend more than 2 million hours. For other things, maybe the price could flatten. For other things, the price has to be linear. This is the exact work that we have to figure out. We can take this afterwards in the group work.
Thank you, Aki.